Actually, this video, the preceding video, and the video yet to follow was all inspired by one idea, which was I watched Insidious: The Last Key, and I wanted to review it. And then I thought, oh, dude, I should do like a video on James Wan, this video. And then I was like, oh, fuck, who is another good, awesome horror director? Wes Craven. Okay, so I did the last video. So now, here we are. We're halfway through the fucking trilogy of horror masters. Though next one is not going to be entitled Horror God Chapter 3 or Part 3, whatever the fuck I labeled this. At any rate, James Wan, holy shit, man, this motherfucker is for real. When you think about it, and similar to Wes Craven, you know how I said he co-defined the 80s and he essentially defined the 90s, it's very similar with James Wan, because I would say he co-defined last decade, the 2000s, because he did the original Saw movie. And I mean, if you actually watch the original Saw, like, it is brutal in parts. Like, I wouldn't say like omega violence, but it has some like pretty gross scenes, or even like things that like conceptually are sort of like, oh, oof, damn, that's rough, It wasn't really until like, I'd say Saw 3 that it became straight up like torture porn. I mean, Saw 2 was really violent and shit, but like, and it was very clever as well. It was a very worthy sequel in my opinion. But at any rate, the Saw franchise was very big in the 2000s. It was one of like the defining, like, you think of the 2000s and like, if not the first thing, one of the first things that should pop into your head is like that little fucking jigsaw puppet that does the creepy ass laugh and like tells you what your fate is gonna be and shit like that. So very inventive. But then you have this decade, which it's interesting because I sort of think that like with revolutions, be it in either music or cinema or what have you, revolutions are meant to like really push the boundaries and sort of like, create new freedoms for like future works and stuff like that, similar to like 90s parental advisory music. To own an album that was a CD that had the parental advisory logo on it, it was almost like a badge of honor. And these guys like fucked the fucking fuck out of their fucking albums, you know what I'm saying? Like, they really went like all out. Like, it was very excessive. But then, you get the following decade and shit kind of mellows out. It's like you've got this new freedom of expression, it's not like this big fucking shock anymore. And it's like now you can kind of take the freedoms that you have and do something like constructive with it. And that's the way that I feel about the horror movies today. That frankly, I mean, like, the best of them, the most popular of them, are helmed by James Wan. They're either helmed by him or like overseen by him. One of which is the Insidious series, of which he directed the first two. Lee, I think, Wannell, he was also like a co-writer of Saw with James Wan, directed the third one, and then Oren Peli, I believe, directed the fourth one. But at any rate, James Wan directed the first two movies and oversaw the next two. And he also directed The Conjuring. And it's apparent that James Wan has a boner for Patrick Wilson, but that's okay because Patrick Wilson is a fucking awesome actor. And I live in Connecticut, okay? The Warrens Museum is probably about an hour's drive away from where I live in Monroe. So it's really kind of exciting to see like a literal, like the real horror franchise or horror universe, because this is a decade for universes. You got the Marvel universe, you got the DC universe, but the Marvel universe is fucking fantastic. And it's like, even things that have failed that probably won't continue, like the Mummy, Universal's Dark Universe, which I would actually like to see done right. Incidentally, like the monster movies, the original ones, like redone with better special effects, like Creature from the Black Lagoon, The Mummy. Anyways, I'm getting off topic here. Everything is like universes. And when the original Conjuring came out, now I'm here to tell you right now, okay, I am not one to jump at movies in the theaters. I've got a pretty good like radar for like when a jump scare is gonna happen, and I mean, every once in a while a movie will get me a little bit, but I'm usually pretty good at like holding it back and like refraining from the actual physical like jump. I'm here to tell you right now that the first Conjuring made me jump 3 times. That's like a record. The Conjuring 2, which I would argue is also a great movie. It's not as scary, but it does like flesh out the characters a little bit more. and it has a lot more like heart, you know. I mean, don't get me wrong, like Ed Warren is kind of a Boy Scout and shit like that, and you know, I don't. While I have nothing against the actual Ed Warren, you know, who was a demonologist, I mean, I actually interviewed him one time, and I interviewed his wife about Ouija boards. It was a project that I did in the 8th grade. I mean, their phone number is public record, so you could like literally just look it up in a phone book and call them, and they're not like dicks about it either. They're not like, oh, gee, what are you doing? You know, like they actually welcome it, and they will gladly give you like a free interview. That at least they did. You know, I mean, now I don't know so much. It's like, you know, Lorraine Warren's gotten a lot older, and unfortunately Ed is no longer with us. But like, regardless of like how accurately in terms of personality the characters are portrayed, it's still cool because it's based on actual occurrences, actual cases that they saw. And you know, and I mean, of course there's a lot of embellishment, but it's all based on like actual stuff that actually happened. Like Annabelle is a real thing, and the actual real Annabelle is in Monroe, Connecticut. You can pay to go to their ghost hunting museum, which is actually attached to their house, I believe. And I mean, you're accompanied by a priest, and the priest says a blessing, like, you know, before you go in and shit like that. But it's like a real thing. And I mean, the real Annabelle isn't like this creepy ass porcelain doll with a fucked up eye. She's a Raggedy Ann doll. But there is a story, several stories about her, you know, one of which is like she fucking grabbed somebody like by the arm, and there were apparently like actual nail marks in their arm. It's so fucking cool. I mean, I would totally go just for the fun of it. I don't know if I necessarily buy into it. And I mean, again, I think that James Wan's movies are very like, you know, staged, very like embellished, as it were. But still, he created a horror universe around actual events that happened with a family that lives in Connecticut. And again, as a Connecticut resident, I just think that's the fucking coolest thing ever. Connecticut is like this decade's horror, you know, universe, basically, you know. But they did the spin-off Annabelle, which honestly I wasn't terribly fond of. I think they kind of skimped out on the ending, barring spoilers, but I think they really should have gone for the nuts a little bit more. It would have made the movie a lot more scary. However, Annabelle, what is it, Annabelle Origins? Annabelle, the prequel that they made like a couple years later, was actually really good and really freaky. I don't really think it's based on any historical fact whatsoever, but it's still like a really freaky movie. And actually it sort of enhances the first Annabelle. Like after you watch Annabelle, I believe it's Annabelle Origins, like you want to watch the first Annabelle to see how things turn out. So it's like so far so good. And there's a lot of rumors of things, you know, the Crooked Man, which appeared in The Conjuring 2, and also the nun who appeared in The Conjuring 2. And in Annabelle Origins, they refer to the nun very briefly in a scene. So it's sort of like, holy shit, like they're establishing this universe. And allegedly in 2019, James Wan is set to direct a third Conjuring film. And all these other like periphery movies, like both of the Annabelle movies, they were like executive produced by James Wan. Like the other Insidious movies that were not directed by him were executive produced by him. And I mean, this dude's like epic because he's done other shit too, like the Fast and the Furious 7, the last one with Paul Walker, like he directed, and it got like huge critical acclaim. I mean, the guy is just a very, very talented director, but I really hope, I mean, you know, if he wants to branch out and do other shit, that's fucking awesome. But I really, really hope that he, like, sticks to his roots in horror because he is that good. This dude is fucking brilliant. The way he sets up his shots, the way he sometimes delivers, the way he sometimes doesn't, and just fucks with you a little bit. But his movies are, like, meant for seasoned horror fans, I feel, and are, again, just brilliant. Like, he is the modern master of horror, and he has defined this era. Even like other movies that had nothing to do with him, I think they've taken inspiration from his directing style. So, you know, just fucking awesome dude. Totally epic, like, you know, on par with Wes Craven. I think that Wes Craven, like, I drew the comparison, again, because Wes Craven sort of co-defined 80s horror and then defined, really, in my opinion, 90s horror. And again, that's sort of how I feel about James Wan, just like a generation later. Like, he co-defined 2000s horror, and now I think he's defining modern horror. I don't know if anybody else has drawn that comparison, but the dude's fucking epic. At any rate, Next video that I do is going to be, I mean, I will be reviewing the most recent Insidious film, but I'm also going to kind of be like going over all of them and just my general thoughts on the series. But yeah, that's it. Anybody else like James Wan? Let me know.